Hello and welcome back to the BIN2BEAN training series on accessing and applying for public funding and grants. This module will focus on how to plan your budget project and understand eligible costs. Once you've defined your project idea and planned your activities, you'll need to translate all of that into numbers. The budget isn't just a formality, it's how you prove that your project is affordable, feasible, and compliant with EU rules. A well-prepared budget can make your proposal stronger and help avoid surprises during the project. So, let's have a quick look at how to build a clear and credible budget for your EU project. Personnel costs are often the largest part of your budget. They cover salaries for the people working on the project, including employees, natural persons working under a direct contract, SME owners not receiving a salary, volunteers. Depending on the type of personnel cost, they must be declared as actual, meaning costs are actually incurred by the beneficiary during the action duration, or unit costs. In EU projects, personnel time is measured in person month. But what does that mean? A person month represents one person working full-time for 1 month on the project. So, for example, if a researcher works full-time for 3 months on the project, that equals 3 person months. If someone works half-time for 6 months, that's also 3 person months. This way of calculating effort helps evaluators understand how much time each partner plans to dedicate and whether your resources are sufficient for the task you've proposed. Then we have subcontracting costs. These are used when you need to outsource specific tasks to external partners who are not part of your consortium. For instance, specialized lab tests or independent evaluations. Remember, however, that subcontracting should only cover tasks that your consortium cannot do internally. The core work of the project should stay within the partners. When choosing a subcontractor, it is important to apply the principles of best value for money. Next are purchase costs, which includes travel, equipment, and other goods, works, and services. Travel costs cover expenses like transport, accommodation, and daily allowances for meetings, conference, or site visits. Always make sure the purpose of the travel is clearly linked to the project activities. For equipment, you can usually only claim part of the costs that matches how much you actually use for your project, taking into account both the depreciation period and the percentage of time it's used specifically for project work. Finally, other goods, works, and services include consumables and supplies, dissemination and communication costs, such as publication fees and conferences fees, and costs related to intellectual property rights. Finally, the beneficiaries or affiliated entities may charge costs under other cost categories, including financial support to third parties and internally invoiced goods. But the eligibility of these costs will vary depending on the call. All the above mentioned costs, excluding subcontracting and other cost categories, contribute to indirect costs, which are calculated as a flat rate of the direct eligible costs. The flat rate is usually fixed at 7% or 25%, depending on the program. If you think that these names are too many and overwhelming, the good news is you don't have to figure everything out on your own. The European Commission provides several tools to help you, including the annotated grant agreement, which explains the rules in detail, with examples and practical guidance. It can be used when preparing the proposal, but also for reporting once the project is funded. I strongly recommend downloading the AGA and keeping it as a reference during both proposal preparation and project management. You can find it as a supplementary material for this module. When preparing your proposal, remember that your budget must be entered directly into the Funding and Tenders portal. However, there's also more detailed budget breakdown in the implementation section of Part B of your proposal. There, you'll find tables where you should allocate costs to different work packages, show how many person months are planned for each partner, provide explanation for significant costs, like subcontracting or large purchases. These details help evaluators see whether your budget matches your work plan and whether your resources are sufficient for the project. Before closing this module, it's also important to understand how cost reporting works. In traditional projects, you report your actual costs. This means declaring the real expenses you've paid, such as salaries, invoices, and travel tickets. Keeping detailed records to prove that your costs were necessary and linked to your project activities. However, many EU programs are now moving towards the lump sum model. In a lump sum project, instead of reporting every individual cost, you received a fixed amount for completing specific project tasks or deliverables. You don't have to provide invoices for financial proofs for every expense, but you must show that the work is truly carried out. Lump sums reduce administrative burden, but require careful planning so that your fixed payment covers all real costs. Within the Funding and Tenders portal, each call will provide indication on whether the project will follow a standard or lump sum reporting to allow you to plan the budget accordingly. After discussing how EU proposals work, in our next video, we'll explore how to find national and regional funding opportunities that could also support your biowaste to solid innovations. See you in the next module.